Okay, I'm just starting the recording. People sometimes want to see this afterwards. Okay, so tonight we're discussing Raban Gamliel and the post-destruction years. So what does that mean? That means that for the past couple of sessions, we've talked about how there was the Great Revolt from 66 to 70. In the year 70, the Romans entirely vanquished Jerusalem. They set fire to the temple, destroyed the Temple Mount, destroyed Jerusalem, probably executed every male who was still living in Jerusalem. We still have that last sort of holdout at Masada. And then you have a group that last week we talked about, or 2 weeks ago rather, because we're running every other week, we talked about this group that went to Yavne. And Yavne was founded by Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai. Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai was sort of this great visionary who repackaged all of Judaism so that we would, in the form that we have it today. And it was a very temple-based religion before Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, and then after Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, it became something that that is similar to the way we see it. And we said that maybe one way to summarize Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai is that after the destruction of the temple, Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai set up the 4 cubits of halacha as the portable homeland of the Jewish people. If you remember, the famous story of Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai is that he sneaks himself out of Jerusalem in a coffin, and he manages to sneak out in a coffin, and he appears before the Emperor Vespasian, or not yet the emperor, and he calls him emperor, and ultimately Vespasian grants him 3 wishes, at least so the story goes. And in his 3 wishes, he says, give me Yavne and her v'chachameha, Yavne and her wise men, and he says, give me Yavne and her wise men. He says, give me Raban Gamliel, and give me a doctor to heal Tzadok HaKohen. So working backwards, Rabbi Tzadok HaKohen was a Kohen. He had been fasting for many days, and Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai wants to heal him. Raban Gamliel represents the dynasty of Hillel. Gamliel is a dynasty that is very important. The credibility of the court rests ultimately on it coming back to its former glory, and Gamliel is key to that. And Yochanan ben Zakkai knows that he's a temporary figure, and for about 15 years, Yochanan ben Zakkai is the head of the court until he can reinstitute Raban Gamliel. The reason he has to ask specifically for Raban Gamliel is because Gamliel was probably associated with the rebel party. He was a figure closely associated with the resistance to Rome. Maybe not initially, but certainly at the end, Raban Gamliel may have been persona non grata in the eyes of the Romans. And so securing his release was very important. What we're going to look at tonight is a little bit of the early institution of Yavne and the importance of Raban Gamliel as a personality. And at the same time, we're going to really keep one eye on Yavne and the other eye on Rome. We're going to a lot of Roman history we're doing tonight. Okay, this is a fascinating little text. I want to tell you what this text is. This text is from probably one of the earliest sections of the Mishnah ever to be written, and it's called Masechet Ediot. Ediot means testimonies. So there is a book of the Mishnah, which is just sort of the testimonies. It seems like this may have been even created before the grand organization of the Mishnah was envisioned. At the very first moments when they started to worry about what would happen, you can read into this text that there is a panic going on. They are afraid what's going to happen to their religion, that the temple has been destroyed, the Jewish people are scattered all about, and there's a repository of knowledge, and there's just this sort of fear that this repository of knowledge is going to be lost. So let's just look at the text and we'll see what it tells us. It says, Mishenichnu nichnesu chachamim bekerem b'Yavne. When the rabbis first got to Yavne, this gives us that early snapshot of what's happening in this place. And remember that Gedaliah alone thinks that Yavne was like a refugee camp in which Raban Gamliel was sent there by Vespasian. He wanted a place where he could keep a good eye on these rebellious Jews. He sent them to Yavne. This is the theory of Professor Gedaliah alone. Gedaliah alone thinks that Yavne is a refugee camp. And this Mishnah in Eduyot really makes that sound like it's plausible. So all these rabbis are gathering in this place called Yavne, the vineyard of Yavne. Amru, they said, Atida sha sheyeh adam mevakesh davar midivrei Torah. There's going to be a time, right? I'll work in the English. When the rabbis entered the vineyard of Yavne, they said, in the future there will be a time when men will look for the words of Torah and will not find it. The words of the scribes and will not find them. As it says, behold, the days come, saith the Lord God, that I will send a famine in the land, not a famine of bread, nor a thirst of water, but a hearing of the words of the Lord. And they shall wander from sea to sea, and from north even to the east. They shall run to and fro and seek the word of the Lord and shall not find it. So here they're quoting from the book of Amos, and they quote this pasuk. The pasuk basically talks about running scatterbrained, not being able to find the word of Torah. That these are the lost words of the Torah. And so the rabbis look forward, and they're petrified that people won't find these words of the Torah. So what do? They begin to write down the teachings of principal rabbis. For one word of Torah is not identical to another word of Torah. Let us begin with Hillel and Shammai. And so they begin by teaching the words of Hillel and Shammai. So this book, Eduyot, it is a catalog of all the things that we know that rabbis of previous generations had said. So that already tells us this is a very early book of the Mishnah, and it's very interesting. So what is written in this book of Eduyot? What are we learning about Rabban Yochanan ben Zakkai? So here, actually, let me just a point of clarification. The previous slide was the Tosefta. The Tosefta of Eduyot, that is a work that is roughly parallel to the Mishnah. Let's think of them as two different editions of the same material. So the Tosefta had that introductory piece. The Mishnah itself does not. But the text that I've now given to you is that was, let's say, chapter 1. Here we are at chapter 7. So if chapter 1 is Hillel, chapter 7 brings us to our subject for tonight, Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai. And so here we the Mishnah starts with Rabbi Yoshua. I tell you about Rabbi Yoshua, you're going to have to put Rabbi Yoshua on the side. You're going to put him over on a shelf, and you're not going to think about him for another 30 minutes at least. Rabbi Yoshua is going to become very important. He's very important in relationship to Raban Gamliel, but since I was dealing with this text, I wanted to show you that Rabbi Yoshua appears here. But I don't want to deal with him. So you'll just have to remember, when Rabbi gets to the end, he's going to deal with Rabbi Yoshua. So again, we're in this book of Eduyot, and it's telling us different things that happen. It says, Heim He'idu, Rabbi Yoshua told the story, Al Archod Shel Nachtumin Shehein Tmeot. So we testified about the interlaced things of the weavers, that they create certain kind of ritual impurity. The blue parts are the parts which are really important. He'idu al tanur shechatcho chuliot v'natancho ben chuli l'chulia. They testified about this really interesting oven, which is actually called the oven of Achnai, which is a raging debate between the rabbis. And one of the most interesting stories in all of rabbinic literature is about this stove, which is at the end of tonight's lecture. And the next blue part, this is where it gets important to us, Maaseh Raban Gamliel. We know that Raban Gamliel shahalach lito rishut mehegyon b'Suria v'shahalavo. We know that Raban Gamliel went to Syria to get permission from the procurator what was he going there to do? In all likelihood, he was getting permission from the procurator to go to Rome. We have several stories in Talmudic literature about Raban Gamliel traveling to Rome. And he goes there, and we're going to try and speculate. We're going to try and construct what he does during that time. And in fact, there may have been more than one trip to Rome, because we have different stories within rabbinic literature where Raban Gamliel goes to Rome, and he is accompanied by different members of the rabbinic community. So there very well could have been two separate trips of Raban Gamliel going to Rome. And Raban Gamliel going to Rome, I took a cruise to Rome also, but I don't think they're going to write a Mishnah about it, right? Why are they not going to write a Mishnah about my cruise to Rome? Because what did I do in Rome? I visited the synagogue. I ate kosher pizza. Sorel and I went to see the Colosseum. We saw the birthday cake. You do the things you do in Rome. When Raban Gamliel went to Rome, he went to see very particular individuals. Okay. Now, where does he go? So Raban Gamliel goes to see one of three people. These three people, actually, we'll go to, these three people are the Flavian Emperors. So the first Flavian Emperor, Vespasian, he's the one who conquers Jerusalem. His son, though, is Titus. And Titus takes over about 10 years after the destruction of Jerusalem. But Titus very quickly gets a fever and dies. And he is taken over by his brother, Domitian. Now, Domitian is a bit of a character. We'll get back to how he's a character. But these are the coins that these three Flavian emperors mint for themselves. We probably have all at some point seen a version of these coins, right? The coins celebrate the Roman victory over Judea. Probably the one that you've seen most is the one on the bottom left, Judea Capta, right? And that's the one that was minted by Vespasian. But you can see that there's one from Titus on the top left. You can see that Domitian also minted a coin about celebrating the capture of Judea. And you also see, okay, apologize for the typo already. It says Judea Devicta. Judea Devicta means Judea conquered, not conjured. Should be conquered. I think it was on autocorrect, going too quickly. So this is also another coin that is issued by Vespasian. You can see in these coins how Rome celebrated its dominance over Judea. That Judea, as we had noted in previous lectures, they had been a perennial thorn, a very difficult place to be. And these coins, in a way, show the vanity of the Roman emperors. Now, the Judea at the time that Raban Gamliel comes into power has this status. Dedici, I think, is how it's pronounced. My Latin is less impressive than it should be. But this is the status of conquered people who were deprived of all their collective rights. So the kind of collective rights that might have ordinarily obtained in the world at this time were the ability to run your own courts, the ability to perhaps control your markets, and to run your own localities. The Romans liked to allow local authorities to run their own affairs. Here, though, what we're discovering is that the Roman authorities were essentially punishing, or at least putting the Judeans in their place. And that's why they they declared them Dedici. Now, Raban Gamliel may have gone to Rome to lift that status. The problem here is that the particular individual that we're talking about, or that's important to us right now, is the third of the Flavian Emperors, Domitian. Now, this Domitian over here, it was an exceedingly vain individual, so vain that he had himself referred to as Lord God. And I'll just show you a very interesting thing about his coin, right? Apparently, he was very troubled by his own premature baldness. But you can see on that coin, how does he look? Full head of hair, right? I would dare say he's got godlike hair, if I was being a little cheeky. So, how's the sound right now? I just got a message, an unstable internet connection. Is the sound better now?
It's a little better now, but for a while it couldn't really hear well.
Okay. Okay. Nothing I'm going to be able to do about the sound at the moment. So hopefully we can, hopefully it stays okay. Usually still not great. Okay. Let me text my children to get off the internet. See if we can do that to all right, I'm hoping we can. Usually I have pretty stable Wi-Fi, so I'm not sure what's going on. All right. Let's all right, I'm going to keep my eye on the chat, and people can tell me if that does not show up well. But what do we want? One of the things that I want to demonstrate to everyone is that this particular individual, Domitian, was exceedingly difficult for the Jews. And here's a section from Suetonius, who's a Roman historian. He writes the Life of Domitian, and this story is a story that he tells. In the days of Domitian, the collection of all the Jewish tax was carried out with special severity. Informers were encouraged to come to the fiscus and inform on individuals who practice Judaism secretly, and also on those who sought to evade the payment of the tax levied on their nation. Now, what's the tax levied on their nation? Back in the day, before the temple was destroyed, there was a temple tax, and everybody paid a tax. All Jews throughout the diaspora paid a temple tax, and it helped to support the activities of the temple. Probably also made the Kohen Gadol a little bit rich. But once the temple is destroyed, the Romans, as a way of letting the Jews know their place in the world, told them that tax now belongs to the Roman government. And so Suetonius is telling us that Domitian made sure that Jews were taking this tax, but it gets worse. Okay, so they would inform on individuals who practiced Judaism secretly, and also those who sought to evade the payment of the tax levied on their nation. They were concealing their Jewish origin. I myself remember a scene from my youth when the procurator, surrounded by a host of his assistants, sorry, I did talk to text. Sometimes it's hard for me to get all of this stuff done in time. So it should be assistants, not with, not as in those who assist him. Subjected an old man of about 90 to a physical examination in order to determine whether or not he was circumcised. In other words, they accused him of not paying the poll tax. They said, "You're a Jew, and we'll prove it." And they forced this 90-year-old man to take his pants down to either prove or disprove his Jewishness. This is how Domitian handled the Jews. Domitian was also, he was in a way puritanical. He put Vestal virgins to death for violating their vows. He would expel people from Rome for acts of adultery, even though he was a serial philanderer. He was he was one of these people who was incredibly spiteful. One of the things also about Domitian, which we should note, is Domitian was the one who built the famous Arch of Titus, right? I think it's kind of interesting. Vespasian wins the war, Titus carries things away, and his brother Domitian builds the Ark of Titus. So this is a guy who seems to really have an axe grinding for the Jews. He also has a famous war with the Roman Senate. And here's a story from the Midrash Rabbah about what was happening during the days of Domitian. Once, when Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Joshua and Raban Gamliel were in Rome, the royal Senate voted a decree which said that 30 days thereafter, there were to be no, oh gosh, I'm so sorry about the talk to text here. There were to be no more Jews left. Gosh. I just have to change that. I'm sorry. Oh.
Capital J.
Yeah. Okay. There were no Jews in the world. Now, one of the emperor's senators belonged to the God-fearers. He sought out Raban Gamliel and told him about the decree. The rabbis were greatly distressed, but the God-fearers said to them, "Be not dismayed. Between now and then, the time when the decree is supposed to go into effect, the God of the Jews will surely take steps to help them." When 25 days had gone by, he revealed the whole thing to his wife, and she said, "But 25 days have already passed." Said he, "There are 5 days left." She, who was even more righteous than her husband, said to him, "Have you not a poison ring? If you suck on it and die, the Senate will suspend sessions for 30 days on your account, so that the decree will lapse." He did as she said and died. The rabbi came to see her to show their sympathy. Said they to her, "Alas, for the ship that has sailed into the harbor without paying the fee." She said to them, "I know what you're saying, but the ship did pay the fee." She entered a chamber and brought out a box which contained his foreskin. Now, I'm sorry for the trigger warning here, but this is a fascinating text for a number of reasons. Number one, there is a lot of evidence at this point that there were many secret converts to Judaism in the Roman Empire, and that this was an issue under the reign of Domitian to try and flesh out some of these secret converts. And here you have, the way the story is told, that you have a member of the Roman Senate who essentially takes one for the team. He gives his life the ultimate sacrifice to protect the Jewish people. The rabbis come to his wife and says, "Too bad he wasn't circumcised, because if he had been circumcised, he would have gotten into heaven." And she says, "No, he did pay the price. You guys just didn't know." This has all sorts of very interesting implications about secret conversion, and just absolutely fascinating. But what it tells you right now is that there was tremendous tension between the Roman Empire and the Jews. That Raban Gamliel faces a scenario where he has to find an official status. He needs to create a stable and durable place for official organized Jewish religion in a very hostile environment. And so this is his mission. This is likely why he's sailing to Rome. There are several other stories that are told in the Talmud about the tensions between Romans and Jews at this time. For example, this is a section of the Talmud from Baba Kama, and in Baba Kama, it talks about an ox goring another ox. And so there's a disparity, there's an asymmetry between the laws of Jews and the laws of non-Jews, and the way in which these laws interface creates an inequity with respect to non-Jews. So here is another example of how the Romans are examining Jewish law. So he says the sages taught the following story in the context of the aforementioned halacha. And the Roman kingdoms once sent 2 military officials to the sages of Israel and ordered them in the name of the king, teach us your Torah. The officials read the Torah and repeated it again, reading it for the 3rd time. At the time of their departure, they said to the sages, we have examined your entire Torah, and it's true, except for this one matter that you state, i.e., with regard to an ox of a Jew that gored the ox of a Gentile. The owner is exempt, meaning the Jew doesn't have to pay the Gentile anything, right? But if exempt from liability, whereas with regard to the ox of a Gentile that gored the ox of a Jew, whether it was an innocuous or forewarned, 2 different kinds of animals, one which is already predestined, designated as dangerous, that's the forewarned, that's called a muad, and the innocuous. So these are all getting into the details of that law, but here he says the owner pays full cost of the damage, right? So if the ox of a Jew gores the ox of a Gentile, the Jew doesn't have to pay anything. If the ox of a Gentile gores the ox of a Jew, the Gentile has to pay full cost. Where's the symmetry? That doesn't sound fair. The official's reasoning was that this halacha is difficult whichever way you look at it. If the phrase of another is meant in the precise manner, that the owners of both oxen must be Jewish, then even the ox of a Gentile gores the ox of a Jew, the owner of the ox should be exempt from liability. And if the phrase of another is not meant in a precise manner, and the oxen of all are included, then even when the ox of a Jew gores the ox of a Gentile, the owner should be liable. They added, but we will not inform on this matter to the kingdom, having acknowledged that the entire Torah is true. We will not reveal this ruling, as it will displease the kingdom. Leaving the particulars of oxes goring aside, you can see that the Romans are looking deeply into Jewish matters, and they're worried about what's going on. They're worried about the way in which Jews are engaging in law, and maybe their law is causing friction with their Gentile neighbors. And this is already a suspect group in the Roman eyes. Additionally, we see, though, that we're going to have friction between the Jews and the non-Jewish culture on another level. So it says as follows. The Gemara answers the members of the house of Raban Gamliel. Background to this. This is the Talmud in Sota that says you shouldn't study, there was a prohibition against studying Greek wisdom, and tells a story of things that happened when people studied Greek wisdom. Think Hanukkah, think all of the Hellenistic assimilation. So the Gemara answers, the members of the house of Raban Gamliel are different, as they are close to the monarchy, and therefore they had to learn Greek wisdom in order to converse with the people of authority. Here, what we're learning is that Raban Gamliel needed to be able to converse in Greek, in philosophy, and maybe in Latin. Why? Because he had this job to do. He was going to Rome. He was going to ask for the official status of the court. And it's quite likely that after Domitian passed away in 95 of the Common Era, that Raban Gamliel goes to Rome, and he in fact does get permission to not just have this academy at Yavne, but to be able to gain the authority for the Jews to administer their own courts and have the authority to mete out punishments and to administer Torah law to everyone. When you assemble all of these stories, when you assemble the fact that there were Romans who came to investigate Torah, when you assemble the fact that the house of Raban Gamliel was able to study Greek, when you see that he traveled to Rome several different times, when you see the Agadot about the persecution of the Jews and the fear that the Jews were converting people, you start to see that there's this picture of a hostile government, and that Raban Gamliel needs to gain this trust. Okay. Now, Actually, let me go to this. So, what are some of the things that Raban Gamliel does with his power? So, we have a couple of good examples of Raban Gamliel's um, edicts. One of his edicts is that he allows a single witness to relate testimony regarding an aguna. Normally in Judaism, you think that you need two witnesses to do something. In this case, what Raban Gamliel is, his edict is that there's a concept in Torah law called Eid Echad Ne'eman B'Isurin. One witness is believable with respect to matters of kosher and non-kosher. And so here we allow one witness to give testimony that, that somebody's husband passed away in war, and that, or he fell off the side of a boat, or was killed by some natural disaster, and she's allowed to remarry, rather than having to rely on two witnesses, because if you rely on two witnesses, she may never be able to get remarried. Another example of his is that he noticed that people were playing games in divorce, because one of the favorite games of everybody who plays the divorce game it's called "You Hurt Me, I'm Going to Hurt You Back." And so one of the games that was played in the first century was to nullify your wife's get without telling her you were nullifying the get. Caused all sorts of problems. Raban Gamliel said, that's not happening anymore. You do that, I make you automatically retroactively unmarried, so that she doesn't even need a get. So he, again, already two edicts of his protecting women. There are various clarifications in the get and a ketubah. My favorite of all is that the Talmud tells us that Raban Gamliel was the first person to insist that he be buried just in linen. He didn't want the fancy coffin, because he saw that the expense of funerals was getting very difficult for ordinary people, and so he wanted it to be that everyone could have the same dignity. And so he himself, royalty, right? He's the royalty that Yochanan ben Zakkai saved, and he insists on being buried in a simple linen garment. So that kind of tells us a little bit about Raban Gamliel. But I think maybe the most important change for us to look at is embodied in this famous story. Remember, I told you at the very beginning, we had Rabbi Yoshua was mentioned. We didn't see why, but I told you I'm going to get back to him at the end. Well, now we're getting back to Rabbi Yoshua. Rabbi Yoshua is a contemporary of Raban Gamliel. He is also probably at the time considered to be the wisest of the sages. And there is another figure at the same time. Also, we mentioned him because we said in the same Mishnah in Eduyot, we told about the story of the stove of Achnai. The stove of Achnai means the serpent oven, and it's this sort of oven that's made out of rings that stack on top of each other like a coiled serpent. And there's this whole debate about whether it's pure or impure. And we have an argument between Rabbi Eliezer and the rabbis on this particular subject. I'm going to take you through that particular text, and then we're going to talk about why it is an enormously important text and what window it shows us into the world as it changes. It is taught on that day, on the day that they argued about this oven, Rabbi Eliezer answered with every answer on earth. But the sages didn't accept his answers. Finally said to them, if the halacha, if the law is in accordance with me, let this carob tree prove it. The carob tree immediately uprooted itself and moved 100 cubits. And some people say it was 400 cubits from this place. They said, no proof can be brought from a carob tree. Now, basically, what Rabbi Eliezer is doing is he said, hey, I got this great miracle. This miracle is going to prove that I'm right. And he conjures a miracle with a carob tree. And the rabbi says, look, since when do we do halacha with carob trees? This is not, that's not, doesn't prove anything. Again, he said to them, if the halacha agrees with me, let the channel of water prove it. And the channel of water flowed backwards. He said back to him, no proof can be brought from a channel of water. Not a thing. Again, he said, if the halacha agrees with me, let the walls of the Beit Midrash, the study hall, prove it. And the walls leaned as if they were going to fall, but Rabbi Yoshua rebuked the walls and said, when scholars engage in halachic dispute, what is it to you? So now the poor walls, they're stuck. They didn't fall in deference to Rabbi Yoshua, but in deference to Rabbi Eliezer, they did not resume their upright position. So to this day, they're still slanting. So finally, and again he said, if the halacha is me, let it be proved from the heavens. A heavenly voice proclaimed, what do you want with Rabbi Eliezer, with whom the halacha accords in every case? Rabbi Yoshua sprang to his feet and said, Torah lo bashamayim. Rabbi Yoshua cites a verse in the book at the very end of the book of Devarim, which says that Torah lo bashamayim hi v'lo me'ever hayam. It's not in the heavens, it's not across the sea. That you should say, who should go up to heaven and bring it down for us, and who should go across the sea and fetch it for us. Rabbi Eliezer's point here is that the way in which Torah law is now decided is by majority rule. And the majority of the rabbis disagree with you, Rabbi Eliezer. And so they end up putting Rabbi Eliezer in cherem, they put him in excommunication because he won't give in to the majority. And Rabbi Yoshua wins the day. And Rabbi Yoshua, the last part of this is important. It says, Rabbi Natan met the prophet Eliyahu. And he asked him, when this argument was going on, what did the Holy One, blessed be he, do at that moment? And Eliyahu Navi, Elijah the prophet, says, Hashem laughed. And he said, Nitzchuni banai, nitzchuni banai. My children have defeated me, my children have defeated me. What does that mean? That means that in God's Torah scroll, it's written the halacha exactly like Rabbi Eliezer says it. And Rabbi Yoshua said, look, we took a vote, God, and you got voted out. Now, boy, I'll tell you, this piece of Talmud is the biggest political football between the Reform movement and the Orthodoxy, and everybody debates what it means. And that's not my axe. I'm not grinding that axe tonight. What axe am I grinding tonight? There's a professor named Judah Golden who has a very brilliant point. He said, this piece of Talmud tells you that we are at an entirely new stage of Judaism, right? If you go back to the age of the prophets, so the prophets would tell you the halacha. There weren't lots of rabbis around. If you read the beginning of Pirkei Avot, the first principles of Judaism, it says, Moshe kibel Torah miSinai. Moshe received the Torah from Sinai, u'masar Yoshua, and he gave it to Yoshua. Yeshua Zekanim. Joshua gave it to the elders, right? Zekanim l'Neviim. The Zekanim gave it to the Neviim, to the prophets. The prophets gave you the law. They were the voice of the halacha for a long time. But at the end of the Second Temple period, prophecy ends. Now we are in the post-prophetic era, right? The temple itself, we've been uprooted from the temple itself. And now we are doubling down on an entirely new way of articulating the will of God. Articulating the will of God that the Talmud's even willing to put into print is not the will of God as it's written up in heaven. But God says, what can I do? Down on earth, I said to them, I wrote in my Torah, Torah lo bashamayim, the Torah is not in heaven, and therefore I must give in and tell them that it is they have the authority. They have the authority to interpret the law as is. And so Judah Golden's argument is that this is a piece of Talmud that talks about the generation that is contemporary with Raban Gamliel. This is the edict. This is the time of the Jews just escaping the fires of destruction in the Beit HaMikdash. And there are two things that we see that happened in this week's history lesson, which are extremely important. Number one is we see that Raban Gamliel is trying to rescue official recognition from an extremely hostile foreign government. The Romans are hostile to the Jews. The Romans are angry at the Jews. The Romans are celebrating their victory over the Jews, and they impose a special tax on them, and they suspect them of converting people, and they will strip them naked in public to see whether or not they're hidden Jews. And they go and investigate the Beit Midrash to make sure that the laws aren't too crooked. They do all sorts of things. And Raban Gamliel has to ultimately go to Rome. He's got to figure out how to represent himself well enough before the authorities to be able to get a very important mandate. And that mandate is to be able to be the official governing body of the Jewish people. And he succeeds. Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai's dream of academy at Yavne and continuing on and keeping all of this was a wonderful dream, but it had to be taken the next step. There had to be somebody who was going to go and say, we have to formalize this, and it needs to have the kind of authority that you need in order to make Judaism succeed. You'll forgive me if I've told you these stories, but sometimes people say, Rabbi Rosenblatt, you're the chief rabbi of Vancouver, which I'm not. North America does not have chief rabbis. But why do people call me chief rabbi? There's really only one context where anyone comes in and says I'm the chief rabbi. You know what that is? Someone comes into my office and says, Rabbi, you need to really tell him to give more charity. Rabbi, you need to tell him to apologize to me. Rabbi, you need to tell him not to go to court to dispute our inheritance. You're the chief rabbi of Vancouver. They should listen to you. Whenever someone wants me to get someone else to listen to them, they call me the chief rabbi. Interesting how the other party never thinks of me as the chief rabbi that way. So why do I tell you this? Because if I need to get somebody to give a get, I have only one tool in my toolbox. You know what that is? My wit, charm, and good looks. And most of the time that doesn't work. Because like I told you, that the game is you hurt me, I want to hurt you back. So it doesn't matter how charming I am, that doesn't usually seal the deal. It just shows you how difficult it is to run a religious program without that authority. Raban Gamliel knew it was important for him to solidify what the mission of Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai. He needed to have that official authority, and he got that. The second thing, though, is that the rabbis are putting together a Judaism which is a post-temple exercise. We are now no longer in the realm of the temple, and we are no longer in the realm of prophecy. Those two fixtures that had been with the Jewish people from the time of Moses until the destruction of the temple, which is, I guess, the entire 1500-year span of the history of the Jewish people up to that point, it's now entirely changed. And so these rabbis are in charge of repackaging Judaism. And we saw how Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai did that. How he brings the blessing of the Kohen to daily service, how he set up the Passover Seder, how he repackages Rosh Hashanah and Sukkot, all of those things. But the actual beating heart of the Jewish people, the study of Torah, the access to the Word of God is now changed. It is changed into the hands of the rabbis. And the rabbis writing the halacha now have the power to legislate. They have the power to legislate on par with God, and perhaps even able to supersede God, which, by the way, I'll give you an interesting application of this. Which each one of you has put into practice in your own life. I'm certain of it. I know you're thinking, Rabbi, how could you say that? You don't know me that well. And I'll tell you why I say that. Because each of you at some point has said the following words: Baruch atah Hashem Elokeinu melech olam asher kiddushanu mitzotav v'tzivanu lahadlik ner shel Chanukah. Blessed are you, Lord our God, Master of the universe, who has sanctified us with the mitzvah of lighting the Hanukkah menorah. Now, you can look all over the Chumash. Nowhere in the Chumash, nowhere in the 5 books of Moses, nowhere in the book of Joshua, Judges, Samuel, Kings, Isaiah, Jeremiah, Yechezkel, the 12 minor prophets. Anywhere does it tell you have to light Hanukkah candles. In fact, Hanukkah is not even mentioned in the Tanakh. So how can you say that God commanded me to do this? And I answer you, Rabbi Eliezer, Rabbi Yoshua, the Torah is not in heaven, right? The rabbis now have that full authority. They have the full authority. They tell you to light candles. So you say God commanded. What's the math? How did God command? God commanded because God gave the rabbis the ability to speak on his behalf. And this essentially is shaping Judaism to this day. We can talk about how this very concept may entirely occupy the mindset of the Haredi community and the reliance on their gedolim to give them direction in terms of how to vote, serve in the army, all of these other things. That's a whole other discussion. And since Rabbi Federgren is doing the Jewish history of the modern state of Israel, and I am still stuck in the 1st century, maybe I'll leave that to him to tackle more than me. Okay, so that brings us to the end of Raban Gamliel. So I'm open for questions at this point.
Questions? No question.
Well, I just wanted to make a comment because you're talking about the rabbis being the ones invested with saving Judaism for the next generations all the way up to us and hopefully, please God, beyond. But I see a connection from the giving of the Torah at Har Sinai, because God gives the Torah to Moshe, who gives it to Aaron, who gives it to the elders, who gives it to the people, etc., passes it along, and it's one form of Judaism that's appropriate for the people, the Israelites of that time, who then give it to the prophets, and it's appropriate for that time, and now this is appropriate for our time and what was happening in Eretz Israel at that early time. It's a progression, but it's something obviously that God intended and God knew would happen.
Right.
It's just like a.
I'm not suggesting there's not a progression, but what I want to be clear about is that progression, there is a new operating system that is introduced here, right? So that's the if you will, that's the message I'm shooting for at the moment, is that we have a new edict here, and this is really where the authority of the rabbis begins.
Oh, I understand that. What I'm saying is that I think that progression to that new operating system, as you call it, was clearly anticipated by God.
Okay, I'm not suggesting that. I'm not suggesting otherwise. But if you're looking for the moment when we shifted gear out of prophecy and shifted our gears, look, Jonathan might pipe up here and tell me that, wait, Rabbi, you told me that this was Ezra, and then you told me it was Rabbi Yochanan and Zakkai, and now you're telling me
exactly.
Now you're telling me it's Raban Gamliel. So I will say it is a bit of a progression over those 3 individuals. Ezra brings the written Torah to the street. That much I can give Ezra. And Ezra brings maybe the prayer book to the street, because he's sort of the head of the Anshe Knesset HaGadol, the men of the Great Assembly. Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai is the great conceptual founder of the academy of Yavne, of the yeshiva that moves forward, right? If you will, he's Steve Jobs. Raban Gamliel is Tim Cook. He's making sure that it all hits practically. It moves forward into the next iteration.
Device every year.
What's that? Okay, I think I missed that. All right. Well,
Great session, Rabbi. Thank you.
thank you. So we'll be back in Bli Neder in 2 weeks' time. And we'll be moving through the various ages of the rabbis. Hopefully, not too long, we'll get to Babylon.
Rabbi,
Yeah.
Sakritim for linen garments for burial.
Yeah.
Are they one and the same as sackcloth? The actual material?
No, a sackcloth is the mourner's garment,
Yeah.
right? It's a Mordechai wears sackcloth. The people of Nineveh wear sackcloth. Different people trying to show teshuvah wear sackcloth.
They found actual materials that.
I doubt that. They have found some very interesting grave sites in Beit Sha'arim, for example, in the north of Israel.
Yeah.
Rabbi, where does Yehuda Hanasi come in? He's later, isn't he?
So okay, well, right. So let's say that we finished today with the year 95, right?
Yeah.
Well, we have 2 other characters we're going to have to deal with. Probably next week we're going to have to deal with Bar Kochba and Rabbi Akiva. That's 135. Rabbi
Right.
Yehuda Nasi does not write the Mishnah until the year 200.
Okay.
But that's probably our next 2 sessions. Our next 2 sessions are probably Rabbi Akiva and Bar Kochba, and then the one after that is probably going to be the writing of the Mishnah.
Good. Thank you very much. Fascinating.
All right. Thank you all.
Merci
Thank you.
beaucoup.
Have a good night, everyone.
Thank you, Rabbi. Very
Thank you,
interesting.
Rabbi. Be safe.
Nonofte.